Hey, true believers. Woody here with Woodrome Illustrations. Today I am hijacking the Comictopia channel to show you guys a quick tutorial on making a diorama piece. So this piece is circular on purpose. My idea here is that this is a multi-tiered piece that Chris could put on his action figure spinner and allow him with the multiple levels to actually feature multiple characters while that spins. These are using little magnets that have been glued in basically to hold them together. I want this to be as versatile as possible, so he doesn't necessarily have to use all three pieces, or he can even use these as something else. Definitely you can use different kinds of foam. There's the pink foam, the blue foam that lots of people are familiar with. I'm purposely using styrofoam because I love the way it crumbles. I want this particular piece to be very crumbly. It's old, it's falling apart. And styrofoam does that really well, especially as you kind of gouge out sections of it or pull out sections. So let's get started. We're going to use some real basic tools. I'm going to be using a box cutter. This is a simple box cutter I got at the dollar store. And then a number 2 pencil. This pencil is kind of dull, and that's what I want to kind of gouge out some cracks. And that's what I'm doing here. We're just basically making some jagged lines through the styrofoam. Not giving a ton of pressure, but just enough to start breaking up those tiny little styrofoam balls that are inside of there. I'm going back and forth just to break those up further and put more of an indentation. On the crack, we're making some more jagged lines. If you imagine lightning, basically, we're kind of making different cracks in different locations to give that effect. The cracks and the various patterns that we can see on the top of each piece, we want those to continue down the side. So we're gouging out styrofoam there on the side, continuing with those. A tweezer is excellent to use on foam. You can actually use those to pick out sections. Works great with styrofoam, but also with any other kind of foam. If you want big pitted areas, tweezers work great for that. We're going to grab our handy box cutter again. This always works best with a sharp blade. And remember, when you're cutting, you don't want to cut towards yourself. You want to cut away. Just nice little safety tip. The edges of this styrofoam are sharp, and so I'm rounding off or kind of weathering those edges down by cutting off just the sharp angle, turning the knife at a 45-degree angle, and then maybe going a little bit more on the top or a little bit more down the side just to round off that sharp edge. These circular pieces were used with a hot wire cutter. Obviously, if you're copying this design, you don't have to use rounded pieces. Again, the purpose of that is so that Chris can put this on top of his action figure spinner and it spins around. But this could be square, it could be rectangular, whatever you want. Basically, we're making an ugly, very aged stone altar. The patterns that you can see, I did that with a simple pencil and using some things that were sitting on my desk to kind of come up with a fake pattern. The pattern is really up to you, whatever you want to create on there. Styrofoam does not hold a pattern very well. If you did want to put in like magical runes or specific designs, you might want to use either the pink or blue foam that's a little bit more closed cell so that you can put in more detailed items. A lot of the pattern you currently see will be roughed up as I go through with the pencil and with the knife to kind of make this more aged and more cracked and just uglier. You can use your thumb with styrofoam also to kind of, any areas that are partly loose, You can use your thumb to kind of break those up further. So to save time and you're not watching a real long video, you can see now that we have kind of trimmed and scratched up all three of those pieces. Now that that is done, it is time to move on to painting these. When painting diorama pieces, Mod Podge is your friend. I love to start these out, especially since we're going with stone. We're going to do Mod Podge and some simple black paint. Both of these came from the dollar store, so really cheap craft paint and a small bottle of Mod Podge is all you need for this particular set. I'm stippling the brush down deep into those crevices. That way we get paint covered on all areas and none of the white styrofoam is showing. As you have already noticed, the video has been sped up quite a bit. This does take several hours. This was probably like a one-day project, but it does take the majority of one day to complete it. Depending on what color you ultimately want your diorama, you don't necessarily have to use black paint. If you wanted more of a sand texture, you might start off with Mod Podge mixed with a dark brown. I typically use the darkest color possible for this first coat. That way it gets deep down in the crevices, which we would assume are the darkest areas of a diorama piece. This mixture that's going on as our first coat is kind of watery, so we are definitely going to have to do more than one coat. The reason we use Mod Podge is this actually helps to seal the styrofoam and make it more durable so that this diorama can be used quite often, several times, without falling apart. So now I have painted all three. We did do multiple coats, and we did one coat on the back side. Again, I want this to be as versatile as possible, so that Chris can use it for whatever he wants. So we painted all angles so that it'll always be black. Here we're using a little bit of gray. We're mixing that with our black paint. We don't really need any more Mod Podge, so now we're just going strictly with paint. I don't want it to be a bright gray, but we are going much lighter than the solid black. This is our main color for the diorama piece. So they are kind of this stone gray, almost concrete. And here I'm just going over those points. At this point, I'm not really doing a dry brush technique, but I am trying to avoid the deep cracks. So we don't want to get the gray color into those deep cracked areas. We're really just trying to hit the surface of the stone. You can see some areas that we may have missed with the black paint. So with the gray paint, I'm going over that. You could grab your black paint again, whichever works easier for you. But we just want to make sure we don't have any white styrofoam still showing through. Obviously, that would be true also if you're using the pink or the blue type of foam. You don't want that base color to be showing up. I'm just highlighting a few more colors. I have a tendency to make my dioramas too dark, so I'm trying to add in some more gray here and there just to brighten it up a little bit. All right, we have now done all three pieces, so now we're going to lighten that up a little bit. So we're going to use some white, but we're mixing that with gray, so we're not going pure white just yet. So a little lighter tone than what we used last time. And now we are going to start using a technique that's called dry brushing. So we're going to get paint on our brush and then scrape the majority of that off. And using a towel sitting next to us, we're going to take even more paint off. So ultimately, you only want a little bit of paint on your brush. Turning the brush at an angle, we're going to hit just the high points. So any areas that are raised should be getting just a little bit of paint. And so you'll kind of get the feel for this as you go. But again, we're just trying to hit the high areas. This really, when you're doing stone, makes the stone stand out and really makes it look almost real. We're not doing nearly as much coverage as we did with the last gray tone. We're just hitting the high points. All right, we are finally moving on to our last step. Now we're going with a bright white paint. We're not mixing this with any other colors. We're just going to use the pure white. We are going to switch to a different kind of brush. This is a fan brush, which is a very thin brush, and this will help us do dry brushing even better. This is kind of our last step, so really we want the least amount of paint as possible. So I'm scraping off the brush there, I'm drying it on a paper towel, and we're going to hit just the raised areas, but even less than we did on that last coat. I want to make sure I hit the edges because it'll really make those edges stand out. With this diorama, I really wanted it to just be kind of plain stone. If you were working on something and you wanted a little more character to it, before you did this final step, you could add a little more color to the rock. Adding some slight hints of blue or green might give the piece a little bit more life. Also, you can add more texture. So when you get kind of towards these final stages, there are things you can add in, like you can add in little plants or moss, little twigs, or even some extra rocky texture. One of my favorite things to use for a rocky texture is actually clean cat litter. So if you get a little bit of cat litter, clean, again, don't take it out of the litter box, but you can sprinkle that on there and then glue it down and use that to just give yourself a little bit extra texture, maybe some loose rocks. This whole diorama is meant for your kind of typical 6 to 7 inch action figure, but obviously it could be used for smaller action figures as well. Just the steps might be slightly out of proportion. But this one is being used, like I said, for 6 or 7 inch figures. I didn't really measure these pieces at all. I just started with a large circle and then made smaller circles to fit on top. All right, we are all done. Looks good, looks like stone. That's what we were aiming for. So just some basic styrofoam. We wanted to paint the backside too. 3 tiers, and they're held together with magnets. Painting over the magnets does not stop them from sticking together, so that's good. Anyway, that's it today. I hope you guys like this. I'm going to turn the show back over to Chris, and he will end out. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.